Perry, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me on, Colin. Appreciate it. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, when we started talking on LinkedIn, I was like, this is going to be a conversation that people are going to find very interesting because while I've done lots of personal finance episodes now and we've cocked up a good number of different conversations, this one is from a very different angle. And you've been demonstrating how to become a millionaire in 10 years, earning minimum wage. Again, hugely different angle. But I want to go back to when that even became an idea because it's an abstract idea that I don't think many people have spoken about.
Well, yeah, I started a plan 10 years ago, not 10 years ago, about 4.5 years ago now, but it was a 10-year plan, and it wasn't to be a millionaire. I, in common with lots of other people, had set my sights really low. I found myself working behind a bar at age 57 on a minimum wage. I had no money in the bank, and I had £10,000 of the credit card debt. Starting to sound like a Mike Winnett bullshit backstory, but it's not. And I was in a trough view. As you know, you go through life, you go through peaks and troughs, and you put all the peaks on your CV, but you miss all the troughs off. Well, I was in a trough now. I've had some great jobs. I made a lot of money, but I've spent a lot of money as well. And I was in a trough, and at age 57, I realized I had 10 years till state retirement, and that was a bit of a kick up the pants. And up until that stage, as I said earlier, I was waiting for the universe to recognize my genius and just give me £1,000,000. But that's not how it works. You have to give something in return. Everything comes at a price. Most people aren't willing to pay the price. But I was forced into this, backed into the corner, if you wish, because I had no choice. I had to do something massive. Saving for rainy days and an emergency fund. I didn't have time for any of that because I only had 10 years left. 67 retirement age for somebody who's my age now. And so I had to do something, take some massive action. And I originally started only to save £300,000. I thought, how much could I possibly imagine having? And given that the most I'd ever had in my bank account in the previous 57 years was £16,000, and that was off the sale of my first property. So for me to imagine anything more than 300,000 was just, I had no frame of reference for that. So I thought, well, if I can save 300,000 in 10 years, then I'll be pleased with that. And the reason I had 300,000 is because I've always wanted to be wealthier, and I don't think that's an uncommon goal. I'd always want to be wealthy, and if I'm honest, I knew how to get wealthy as well. We all do, but we'll go into that in a second. But I thought to myself, how much is wealthy? Because if it's a number, it should be the same for everybody. But it's not. If you ask different people, they'll tell you wealthy is a different amount of money, so it can't be a number. So I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I mean, weeks before I came up with a goal, and I thought, well, I think wealth is a feeling. So I thought, okay, if it's a feeling, what would you have to be feeling or experiencing or doing in order to feel wealthy? And one of the things I did in my life was I spent 12 years in the Royal Navy. So I had an affinity for the sea, and I've always wanted to buy a nice yacht, not just a normal yacht. I wanted a big fuck off yacht. So I priced one up, and I thought I can get a lovely 50-foot Beneteau for a second-hand one, by the way, for £100,000. And then I figured if I was sat on my yacht in some Greek lagoon with the sun going down with a margarita in my hand and I had enough money in the bank to fund that lifestyle, I would feel wealthy. So I figured 200 grand would do me. By the time I get to 67, I haven't got long left. 200 grand would just, if I was frugal, I could do that. So that's how I came up with the number 300,000. I got, skipping a bit out here, but I got about 2 years, nearly 3 years into the deal, and I realized I'd undershot. And then I came with the idea. I thought, hey, and I crunched the figures that I was making instead of the figures I imagined I could make. And I reckon I can get it a lot better than this. And I think I can, if I push this really hard, I can get £1,000,000 in 10 years whilst earning minimum wage.
That's
And
quite
that's how,
exciting, though,
that's how it
Perry,
came on.
isn't it? Because the goalpost moved because the plan was actually going too well.
Yeah, and it's funny because I was doing these videos because I record all my journey on YouTube, and I was struggling for get writer's block sometimes, and I thought, what can I do? And I was just crunching the numbers again, and that's when I had a bit of an epiphany of this is no, I can't. I can make a lot more than £300,000. I think by the time I got to 3 years, I'd done 110, 120,000. But and then I thought, my God, this is going to be great. This is going to be phenomenal, and I should tell more people about it. And I got myself all excited. And I'm on target right now. I'm nearly 5 years into the game, but I'm not. I don't feel any different, Colin. I don't. and it's because I'm not living the lifestyle of a millionaire. Although I became financially independent after only 3 years, and by the end of this year, my gross unearned income will be about £100,000. But I don't feel any different. I still go to work. I still work 11 hours a day as a cab driver, and I don't feel any different because my lifestyle hasn't changed. And that's what happens with most people. That's what I do in the past. I was guilty of it as myself, as anybody else is when I got a raise, I spent more money.
Lifestyle creep.
And lifestyle creep. Yeah, I was guilty. I've had the new BMWs. I've been on luxury yachts and great holidays. I've dined at 10 and 11 down the street. I've had a really good. So this is not a bullshit backstory because I've had a great past. I've just spent a lot of money and been stupid and spent all my money. Um, so I say I wasn't being any different, but I don't live any different now. I still start work at 5 o'clock in the morning. I finish at 4 in the afternoon. I work 6 days a week for the first 2 years. I work 7 days a week, 80 hours a week for 2 years, taking only Christmas Day and Boxing Day off. So I had 4 days off in 2 years and I was saving 60% of what I earned. And and that's how I saved up. Took me 2 years to save up 20,000 from my first deposit on a rental property. But it's hard. It's hard work. It is. I'm not to say there's no magic wand here. I'm not telling you it's easy. It is bloody hard. But it's possible. I do genuinely believe that anyone who's able to work can become wealthy. Can't just if you're willing to put the hard work in, make some sacrifices, and take time. I've had some great opportunities in the past, and I've walked away. I've owned successful pubs, and I've walked away because I got bored, because I wasn't making enough money fast enough. But I do realize now that time is the hardest part of the whole thing, and it's the most important time. Even if you're just investing in a pension, not doing Spartan as I am in property, it's time in the game that takes it in, and there's no way of avoiding that. So if anybody's trying to sell you a get rich quick scheme, run for a mile, because they don't exist. They genuinely don't exist. And you don't have to take my word for it. I'm no guru. I'm just a cab driver. If you look at anybody who is wealthy now, none of them did it overnight, unless they won the lottery, and then they tend not to hang on to it because they don't understand how money works. But if you look at anybody who's wealthy, so don't take my word, you pick your top 10 most famous guys that took them years to do it. Steve Jobs worked at Apple for 27 years before he designed the iPhone. And yet he designed the iPhone, and then people say, oh, he's an overnight success. Not at all. He did 27 years with a graph before then.
It's mad, isn't it? And
It's
you said
crazy.
you were waiting for the world to recognize you as a genius and
Yeah.
hand you your £1 million. And you named some of the really interesting different things. You've owned a pub. You were dining at 10 Downing Street, and you obviously had some high level roles. What mistakes were you making during that period that meant that you got to 57 and you didn't have the
Spend it all.
financial
I,
power?
I concern myself with looking wealthy rather than being wealthy. And again, that's not unusual. It's much easier to look wealthy than actually be wealthy. You can buy yourself a new suit and hire the car for the day, and you look wealthy, an overnight success if you wish. But you can't then go around with your friends because they'll not see you for the fraud you are, because they knew you before you bought the new threads and hired the new car, or leased the new car. So you then have to go and hang out in different places where nobody knows you, with different friends, or the other frauds, as I now call them, of all pretending to be rich. So I was just did everybody else, As I said, I've had the BMWs and the nice holidays and the designer clothes. I don't own a designer. This is the only shirt I have with a logo on now, and it's got the taxi cab logo on it. So I don't believe in any of that anymore. It's not necessary. And I think the more money that I amass, the bigger the body of evidence I have that what I'm doing is succeeding, the less I'm interested. To the point where, remember I said when I started, I wanted to buy this yacht. I don't want to buy the yacht anymore. It's not important. The yacht, when I started, was a symbol of my success, a symbol of hedony, a symbol of who I am. And it's one of the things that I would advise against is making things represent you. Your clothes don't represent you, your car doesn't represent you, the yacht you have in the hub doesn't represent you. That you don't make these things you. Your job doesn't your job doesn't mean
Define
that
you,
you
yeah.
define you. A lot of people do that, especially if you've got a great job. You got a high level engineer or a doctor or whatever, and it becomes themselves, and they get wrapped up in it. That losing this job or this position hurts them personally, hurts their psyche. Your job is just a means of generating income. It's what you do with the money that's important thing. So it doesn't matter if you're a cab driver like me, and I speak on an equal with, I think, with doctors and politicians. I spent 7 years in politics, by the way. That's how I was at Downing Street, and I've talked with and argued with politicians at high level. And I treat everybody is the same, but it doesn't matter how much money you earn, because if you're earning, here's a statistic for you. The Professional Footballers Association, the PFA, says that 3 out of 5 professional footballers who earned more than £30,000 a week go broke when they leave football. So that tells you that it doesn't matter how much you earn. What's important is what you do with the money. So if you're a hotshot lawyer and you're up to your eyeballs in debt funding your lifestyle, and you don't have anything in the bank, and the slightest personal financial mishap will make you go broke, that's not a safe position to be in. But they have to spend that sort of money to look the part to
Of course.
their colleagues and what have you. And it's not necessary. Don't make your job you. You are not your job. It's just a means of generating income. Doesn't matter what you do. It's what, as a job, or how you generate the money. It's what you do with the money that counts.
The way you speak now, Perry, and the perspectives you've got are clearly a radical shift from how you spent the majority of your life. I appreciate at 57 you were getting a bit of a shock, this 10-year countdown, but you must have rewired some of your other thought processes around materialism and keeping up with the Joneses. What kind of self-work were you doing to achieve that?
It's a great question. I've not asked them before, and I do a lot of self-reflection, self-contemplation, trying to understand why I do these things and what's changed now. I think, and maybe it's an age thing, Con. Maybe it's an age thing that we spend so much time worrying about what others think of us, and almost letting what they think of us, or being concerned of what they think of us, decide how we act, we behave, how we present ourselves. Dante in uh, Dante said, someone where did I get this from? Someone asked his dad, asked their father, I want to do this, but I'm frightened what people will say about it. And his father quoted Dante, and his Dante said, follow your own path, let them talk. And that's what I do now. Now that may be an age thing, or that may be that I've just got to rock bottom, and that I had to put my ego to one side and say, I haven't got time for this ego. This is what's held me back for so long, and therefore I've got to dump this ego in order to go to where I want to go to be who I am. And I'm a cab driver now, as I've said many times. I'm nobody special. I've got no skills and no qualifications. And to me, a cab driver, I used to see people being cab drivers who tried everything else and then being a cab driver. And I almost used to sneer at them, thinking, well, that's the last refuge of a desperate man, to drive people around in a car. But you know what? It makes bloody good money. It's completely stress-free. I don't care what anybody else thinks of me now.
That
And
is
I
a
find
true ego death, though, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
if
absolutely.
you
And
think about your ego when you were younger with some of the high-flying jobs that you had, like
yeah,
pub ownership, a lot of that's personality-led as well, despite
yeah,
the pub having a name above the door. Everyone knows the person that owns the bar they go
that's true.
to because there's a personality to it.
Yeah,
So to go from that to being following your path and letting the others talk, and kind of disregarding it, in particular putting it on YouTube, where you'll have seen the comment section. Sometimes you'll get lots of very helpful comments, but you'll get lots of trolls or unhelpful people who have faceless profiles that will make comments. And if you can just shrug that off and carry on your path regardless, that is a significant change from the person that you maybe spent the first 57 years of your life being.
yeah. There's no question that I have changed. I don't want the things I used to want. I definitely don't think the way I used to. I don't care. And again, as I said, I didn't explain it. I think might be an age thing as well. You get grumpy old men, where they just resent everything and everybody, and they don't care, and they're short-tempered because they no longer have time. I don't have time. I haven't got the 50 or 60 years ahead of me that I did have when I was a younger man, and worried about how I'd need the cooperation of others to make me wealthy. Now I'm just doing it all by myself. It's often the way I prefer it, because people just let you down, and so I know I can always rely on myself. And if I do it by myself, then I won't let myself down, and I don't care what people think. I tell you, I used to. This is a bit of the ego I used to have. It was just the last hanging by a thread piece of ego I used to have when I first started cabbing. I used to shit myself in case I'd pick somebody up who knew what I used to do,
Mm.
and occasionally I'd see them stood at the rank, and I'd say, "Oh fuck, I'm going to pick them up," and they're going to ask, and they'd get in and say, "Yeah, I'm going to so and so, mate." And Perry, what you doing driving a cab? You know, because they knew what I'd done in the past. So I had a little speech ready. And I probably still remember it. So it's been a few years since I said it. So here's what I used to say. He said, um, "Oh yeah, I'm a cab driver. Well, what I've done, I've calculated that if I do this for 10 years, I'll have saved up £300,000. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to buy £100,000 yacht, and me and the wife are going to fill it full of rum and victuals and sail around the Mediterranean as pirates for our retirement." And they go, "Wow." And then I put the knife in and say, "What's your plan, by the way?" "Oh, I haven't got a plan, me just we'll see what life throws at me," and that sort of thing, which is my plan prior to that. And then right at the end, when they used to give you a tip because they felt obliged to give you a tip because you're a mate, and they give you a couple of quid and they'll say, "Cheers, mate, I'll put that towards me yacht." And
Mm.
then but that
It's
was
really good that you
I don't get
recognize
any
that,
more.
though. It's really good you recognize that, and you've worked your way through that. And one of the things that you mentioned was that 3 years in, you became financially free through your investments and your strategy that you'd done. Were there any other milestones before 3 years in that were particularly notable that kind of gave you a big boost along the way?
The the first property, I bought my first. I worked 2 years. It was really tough. As I said, I only had 4 days off in 2 years. And so I bought the first property. I'll tell you the figures. I buy on Teesside. It's too expensive to buy where I live in Gateshead/Newcastle. So I buy in Teesside. I got a two-bedroom semi for £67,000. Sorry, £63,000. Um, it cost me less than 20,000 to get into it. That's with stamp duty, deposits, paying solicitors, what have you. The mortgage at the time was £87, and the management fees were 50, but it was paying £550 a month. So I was walking away with 400 quid at the end of the day. And that was £400 that I didn't have to work for. Somebody else had to work for that. I didn't have to work for that. Somebody else had to work for that. And that was another bit of an epiphany. And also, you don't really believe you can. I don't want to say that. I'd failed so many times in the past, Colin,
Mm.
and I told my wife what I was going to do, and she didn't believe me, and probably still doesn't believe me, because I've let her down so many times in the past as well. But I was fucking determined I was going to do this. And then when I got the first property, and you started getting a body of evidence behind you that, this is working. This. So really, what I need to do is double down on this. But the only bit you can't double down on is the time. So at the time, I was saving £1,300 a month from my cabbing. And then I got this extra property, which made me 1,400, so another £400. So I was now saving £1,700, which reduced the time it took to save the deposit for the next one, and so on and so forth. But so the first one was a wow, I might have something by the tail here, and but I haven't got any more excited since then because it's just grind. It's something I call the suck. Nobody
Embrace the
becomes
suck.
wealthy. Yeah, nobody becomes wealthy without first pushing through the suck. And I'm still going through the suck now. I don't feel any wealthy. I still got the same lifestyles I had when the first day I started cabbing. And I look behind me and I think that's 5 years, but I look forward and I've still got another 5 years. And that's the toughest bit. Your body just adapts. The people say, people say this to me all the time. "Oh, 80 hours a week, 60 hours a week. So I'd rather have my health." And I tell them it's as if you can be wealthy or healthy, that you can't be both.
Mm.
That's what people would seem to tell you anyway. That's not true. You can be healthy and wealthy. I tend to go for a run every night when I finish work. I've always been a fit guy, probably from the forces. But you can be wealthy and healthy. You don't have to be one or the other.
Was property always the vehicle, Perry? When did you decide that buy-to-lets, and I know we're going to get onto serviced accommodation, of course, but
Yeah.
when did you decide that was going to be the vehicle to financial freedom?
Well, how did I start? The first thing I started, I thought, well, okay, here's me. So what you need is you need a goal, and then you need a plan. Because if you've got a goal but you don't have a plan, you don't really have a goal at all. What you have there is a wish, a dream, a hope, an aspiration, but it's not a plan. It's not a proper goal because you don't have a plan. You're just hoping that what you want's going to come true. So you need a plan. And my plan originally was to open up a pension. Why a pension? Well, because that's what everybody says. That's what the government's message is. That's what you're taught when you join the armed forces. You're automatically enrolled, which I'm glad they did, by the way. Now there's auto enrollment at work. They don't say, "Would you like to open a pension or would you prefer to invest in property?" It's just it's auto enrollment. I've got a friend of mine who works in HR, and she said it's very, very difficult to opt out of auto enrollment.
Almost
You've got to,
impossible. Yeah,
yeah,
you have to
you've
go
got to
through
prove.
a pretty big process. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's automated. So and I don't blame the government for that, because the government are trying to reduce the tax burden in 40 years' time for when you have to retire. And if they give 4 or 5 different messages, the message gets blurred and nobody does anything. So they just say we're just all in on one thing. It's the pension. We'll ram everybody into a pension. So I fell for that as well. So I thought, well, that's the only alternative. What else is there? So I went paid £900 to a guy who opened a pension for me, and I don't think he worked for his money. I filled out a risk assessment form. What did I think about this and what I think about that? And I'm sure they just pumped it into a computer and it gave out a list of funds that fit my profile. And he said, "There you are. That's what I recommend. £900, please." Didn't know any difference. Hand over my 900 quid. And then about 9 months later, I was putting money away, and I just looked at this pension. It felt like a bill. I wasn't didn't feel any wealthier. It wasn't growing the way I'd thought it would grow. And so Mark Twain says, when you find yourself on the side of the majority, it's time to pause and reflect. So I thought, this can't be right. There must be another way. And if I've been involved in property in the past. I'm an ex-mortgage broker, um, and that's better. So I get some light here.
Yes, no problem.
And so I understood how property worked. So then I said, okay, shut the pension down, draw my money out, and said, right, we're going to go into property. I start like everyone else does, go on YouTube, find out how it works. I was a little rusty on the finance side, interest rates, what have you. And I thought we were then, so this is 4.5 years ago now, and we were still feeling the pinch from the 2008 banking crisis. Interest rates were at 0.1%. And I thought, well, this is going to go on forever because we were still teetering on the brink of recession. And I thought we're going to have low interest rates for years and years and years. So it's now time to get into property. I got that wrong, by the way, didn't I?
Only recently, though, Perry, up until
Yeah,
2022, you were probably laughing when it came to
yeah, it
mortgage
was
rates.
great.
Like,
Well, yeah, because I bought my third property after 3 years, and my share of the bills in the house, I pay everything to do with the house, so gas, electricity, mortgage, what have you for the house. That's all my responsibility. My wife buys food and presents and clothes and so. So I needed £1,000 a month. So by the third property, I had £1,000 a month in net rents. So after 3 years, I had become financial independent / lean, in that my unearned income covered all my bills in 3 years. Now, let me put that into perspective. Let's say you were to go to your pensions advisor and say, right, what I want from you is to tell me how much I would need in a fund that would, in order to kick out £1,000 a month or £12,000 a year, how much would my fund need to be? Now, if you did that, they would use something called the 4% rule, which is a safe withdrawal rate. I won't go into it here. It's part of the William Bengen invented it, and it was revisited by the Trinity Project. But anyway, what it says is if they get a sum of money, and if you can draw 4% out, it should last you for 30 years, and in £1,000 a month, £12,000 a year. So they would times that sum, 12,000, by 25, because 4% goes in 125 times. So now so your pension advisor will say, you want £12,000 a year, Mr. Wilson? Well, you need £300,000. Right. And how do I get £300,000? Well, if you get an 8% return and you put £200 a month in with your tax refund, it'll take you 28 years. 28 years to get £300,000. And I did it in 3 years in property, and I used 40,000. So not 300,000, not 28 years, 3 years, 40. And that's the bit of the pension thing. Now, does that mean I don't like pensions? No, pensions are great. Pensions are great for an average normal person. If you're happy to work for 40, 50 years, 60 years, maybe, They're great. They will do the job. So much so that if you just worked at McDonald's from age 18 to age 67 or 68, and all you did was put 2 hours of your weekly wage into your Vanguard pension, you'll be a millionaire by the time you retired. That's the truth, because you've got a load of many years in the game, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about saving, and worry about your future, because your future will be sorted out by using that pension. So that's great if you want to work 40, 50, 60 years. I didn't have the luxury of that. I wasn't wise enough to do that when I was 18, and recognize the importance of continuing to do that when I left the forces. Um, uh, but that option's there. So I was back in the corner. I had 10 years to do it. But again, all I'm demonstrating, and I'm not the sort of YouTube guy who say this is how you invest in YouTube. I'm not a how-to guy. This is how I did it. And
Demonstrative.
I've demonstrated, I've recorded it all the way, so nobody can see you didn't do it, because I did do it, and it's all there for posterity. And if anybody wants to possibly do it in 10 years, I say that I'm only halfway through, but it's working okay right now. And let's see what the next 5 years will bring. I'll make sure I record every step of the way, so you can watch me either fall on my arse, or jump in my yacht for a celebration.
Yes. What other vehicles have you used, Perry? So property, your taxi driving income. What else
Yeah.
has supported this financial journey?
What I also did was I drip fed, still do it now, £100 a month into a Vanguard ISA as a safety fund, an emergency fund. Um, Again, I didn't have the luxury to put £100 a month into a bank savings account, because I wanted my emergency fund to earn money as well. So I dripped £100 in there. Until recently, there was £7,000 in there.
Because you're doing about 1,200 a year on that rate, aren't you?
Yes, and I did so. But I've cashed it in. I've cashed £5,000 in, and again, I record it on my YouTube channel, so I'm dead honest about what I've had to do. Some of what I do, I don't advise. Two things I don't advise you do, which is what I did. I cashed £5,000 of my ISA in, um, because I'm buying this serviced accommodation now, and one of the bad things about being in property is it takes a chunk of money to get into it. So my bank balance is about £40,000 now, but it will go down to zero in about
Because you
4 to
paid
6
the
weeks now.
deposit for the
Yeah,
service
tax,
accommodation.
and yeah, so it'll just go. So I needed a buffer, and I just felt comfortable having the £5,000 in cash rather than the £5,000 in an ISA. So I've cashed that in. There's a couple of thousand left in the ISA. I've got £5,000 in cash in my bank account. So I wouldn't recommend you do that, but it's just what I did. The other thing I did on the first property I bought, which I've since refinanced and got 21 grand out of it. Just, I mentioned before, you go through your peaks and troughs. That was my first trough. The tenants complained of condensation inside all the walls. It was quite bad. But I've never been in the property. I've bought 3 properties and I've never been in 2 of them. So anyway, they complained, and the management guys are really good friends of mine. So they went and got their guys to have a look at it, came back with this is what needs to do, and it was the condensation probably been there all the time, but as a combination of high energy prices, they weren't putting the heating on, so nothing was drying out, and the high cost of fuel, they were keeping the windows closed because it was winter time, and so the combination too, there's condensation everywhere. We thought, well, we'll hack back some of the plaster of the walls and clean it up and put some dehumidifiers in there. But the problem was the roof. There was no membrane between the rafters and the slates. It was one of the last 3 in the whole street that had its original roof. So if they put a dehumidifier, it would just suck air through the outside of the roof and bring it in. So it wouldn't take it. It has to have a new roof on. 10 grand. It was 9.5 grand. So
That's
what do I do?
a trough.
That's a trough. So that represents, if you look at the rise in mortgage rates now, so my mortgage was 87, it's now 220. Pay £150 tax a year. I'm walking away with 120, £128 profit, but now I've got a 10 grand bill. So 128 into 10 grand represents about 4 years worth of rental profit. So I'm not going to make anything out. So what I could have done, because I had the 40 grand in the bank, I could have took the 10 grand out of there and delayed the purchase of my first serviced accommodation property, but I didn't. I said, I think right at the beginning that I had £10,000 of credit card debt. One of the first things I did with that was I went to the Halifax and borrowed £10,000 and paid all the credit cards off.
Was that
And that,
because the Halifax was a better rate than the credit card?
yeah, I was paying on the credit cards a little over £400 a month,
Right.
and I got £220 a month on the Halifax to pay it off in 4 years. Now, if I'd have kept on doing that with the credit cards, I'd have probably been kept on paying them forever, because the interest rate was higher than the amount I was paying off. The beautiful thing with a personal loan was you've got a 5-year span, so it's got to be paid off in 5 years. So they were definitely cleared in 5 years, and it saved me £200 a month. Now, I paid all that off in January this year, and then this month, or last month now as it is, I went back to Halifax and borrowed it back to pay for this roof. Is that the right thing to do? Probably not. I don't know.
Time will tell.
Time will tell exactly. So the reason I did it was because I didn't want to delay the serviced accommodation, because there's some chunky numbers in there, and I always want to go for increase in income. The increase in the income means you save faster for the next asset, to invest in the next asset. So I didn't want to threaten that, so I borrowed the money. Hey ho, let's see how it goes.
What about serviced accommodation got your interest then? Because that's you moved away from 3 previous buy-to-lets.
And that was the reason in interest rates. So
Mm.
if we look at the figures on my first one, it's £550 rent, £50 management fees. They charge 10% of the rent. So now we're down to 500. The mortgage was 87. It's now 220. So that means you've got 280 left. But the taxman will tax you on 500 at 20% plus 9% national insurance. So you're now take another 150 off that. You're left with nothing pretty much. So that was again threatening my income. So I needed to do something else. And I've been watching serviced accommodation for a while, and my property manager has half a dozen or so of them, and they are let out all the time. Middlesbrough has just been designated a free port by the government, and they're spending billions at it to bring it up to standard, and they're bringing contractors in from all over the country because there's just not enough qualified people on Teesside. And so I think for some years to come, they'll need all those contractors. And he says that the half a dozen or so service accommodations got are let out constantly. Just you can't get enough of them. So I'm pretty confident the numbers. Let me share the numbers with you. The one I've just bought, I'm buying one now, just the mortgage off on it. It should rent out for £105, £110 a day. So that's over £3,000 a month. Obviously, the cost of getting into it is higher. My buying costs were 20 grand to buy a let. It's now 40 grand for a serviced accommodation, because you've got to bring it up to standard. You've got to put all the furniture in, all the white goods. You need a bigger property, so it's a big 3-bedroom place.
Yep.
So it's cost me 40 grand to get into it. Mortgage is going to be, and I've done it through a limited company. First time I've bought through a limited company, because the next property I bought would take me in the 40% bracket for personal learning. So I wanted to avoid that. So I bought through a limited company. It's a serviced accommodation, so you can't have a normal buy-to-let mortgage. It has to be a commercial mortgage, because you haven't got a short-hold tenancy. You've got a contract. So it doesn't fit the buy-to-let model. So mortgage is £500. Management fees are £600, and I'm thinking gas and electricity and water and what have you, probably another £500. So there's £1,600 off, maybe 3,300. I'm thinking I'm going to net down to about £1,000.
But still, double what you get from your first buy-to-let when it was running perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say you make 12 grand a year. It's cost you 40 grand to get into it. You're making over 25%, 27%, something like that, which on your money is great.
Yeah,
we'll see how it goes. I mean, the downside is that if for every month there is nobody in it, it's costing you £1,000. So you've got to be able to cash flow that. But I'm assured that won't be the case, and it'll be let out all the time. Fingers crossed.
It's not necessarily going to be seasonal. It's not a holiday home. It's serviced accommodation.
Exactly.
Yeah, I completely get that. You've spoken before about almost having like 3 strands. So your income, property, stocks and shares, but the fourth is around a business. I understand you looked at a franchise. What's the situation with that?
I did. I gave up the franchise. I can't say too much about it because I get sued.
Okay.
We had to sign a non-disclaimer. But it was a great shame. I went into it with a friend of mine, and it was working. We enjoyed it immensely. Then my partner and best friend had a heart attack, and he had a nervous breakdown, and so the running of the whole thing fell on my shoulders. And given the fact that I was working 60 to 80 hours a week as a cab driver, that no longer worked, and I couldn't. And we walked away from it, and we got sued for 4 years loss of earnings, I think it was. But we came to an agreement, and we didn't leave. We didn't separate amicably, but
You've moved forward from it.
move
No,
forward. Yeah, it's gone. Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame because we enjoyed it, but there we are.
I was going to say it's interesting you explored that though. Is that something you're going to consider in the future if that can be less admin intensive for you?
Yeah, I don't know. There are only 3 ways to get wealthy, Colin, and they are business. And I know this because if you go through the Times Rich list, excuse me, there's 101. I went through 2020 Times Rich list. There's 101 people on there. There was 3 ways they made their money. One was business. 77 of them made their money through business, and the other one was stocks and shares and property. So they're the only 3 ways you can do it. So what I thought I'd try and do was, well, I've got stocks and shares in my Vanguard ISA. I've got property. What I need is a business to run alongside it. So that was my thinking at the time. Will I go and do it again? I don't know. It comes back to the stress thing. It was very stressful because not only was I working 60 to 80 hours as a cab driver, but then at weekends we're doing things on the franchise and what have you. And I certainly couldn't do it by myself. And I'm not sure if I need the stress anymore, if I'm honest.
There's a trade-off, isn't there? Like,
Yeah,
whereas
absolutely.
if you can just go as hard as you can on the property, let's scale that as much as possible, have a managing agent for it
Yeah.
and reap the rewards of that. So let's get on to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 properties as fast as humanly
Yeah,
possible.
and I think that it's something else you want to consider if you're thinking about going to properties. What sort of property person are you going to be? I'm not the guy who will charge to replace and knock walls down and put kitchens in and bathrooms because that's a property developer. I'm not a property developer. I'm not the sort of guy who wants to manage it. I couldn't be doing with the stress of doing that and clients ringing you because the taps are dripping at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's a property manager. I don't want to do that job either. I'm just a property investor, and so I see my role as an investor is to do 2 things. First of all, generate money to invest, and then look for things to invest in. And that's all I do. Other than that, I'm hands off. I don't want the stress of doing anything. I just want to if I can get 20-25% return on my money, then I'm a happy bunny.
Yeah, understood fully. The name of your channel is Stupid is the Norm. Why do you think that's the case?
It just dropped out a bit there. Say that again, Colin.
Oh, sorry, Perry. I was asking, the name of your YouTube channel is Stupid is the Norm. Why do
Stupid
you
is the
think that's
norm.
the
Yeah.
case?
I got. Do you know a guy called Dave Ramsey, an American guy, American big
Yes,
YouTuber?
I do. Yeah, big
Got his own
financial.
radio show, and yeah, he's huge. And I used to watch him in the early days because he was all about saving money and what have you. And somebody rang his show, and he'd say, "Look, here's my situation, Dave. I'm going to do this and do that." And Dave would say, "You know why you did that?" And I said, "No, I don't, Dave." He says, "Because you're stupid. That's why you did it. You're damn stupid." He says, "But don't feel bad about it." He says, "Most people, when it comes to personal finance, are stupid. In fact, stupid is the norm." And I went, stupid is the norm. I like that. Yeah. So and I was stupid. And I was stupid 57. So I don't mind telling people they're stupid. I said, "But it's okay. I was for 57 years. I was stupid. I did all that stuff as well. Probably worse than you. I mean, I've been bankrupt. I've done all sorts of stuff. I got bumped for the first time when I came to the forces. One of the first things I did was set up a business, and I got bumped for 44 grand
Wow.
in 2000, which didn't sound like a lot of money. That I've got that in the bank now, but back then, I didn't know much about business, and it was the .com bubble that burst, which caused it, and I couldn't carry 44 grand, so I had to go bankrupt. But it was 23 years ago now. You learn from it, don't you? Dust yourself. You go through life, and life has a habit of beating you down. I'm sure as young as you are, there've been times that have been pretty low for you, and you have to just be prepared for that and just say that's going to happen. No, your success is not linear. It doesn't go up in a straight line. It'll go up and down and up and down and up and down. Eventually, if you're learning all the way, you'll get better at what you're doing and learn not make the same mistakes again. But life will beat you down. You just got to be prepared. You don't. The measure of a person is not how many times you get knocked down, but how many times you get back up. And
Absolutely. I would
songs you
agree
learn.
strongly with that. When it comes to personal finance, why do you think stupid is the norm? Obviously, Dave Ramsey's reinforced that belief and shared that with you. Your channel addresses that. But what do you think the factors are that mean that that's the case?
Well, the easy thing to say would be, well, it's all social media, isn't it? And people trying to compete with each other on social media. But this was going on long before social media became a thing. And so I don't believe any of that nonsense at all. We live in a hierarchical society. The human beings love a hierarchical structure, and that means you're competing for the most part, or at least trying to be equal to those who you see around you. It said you don't feel wealthy on as long as people around you've all got the same amount of money as you. You only feel wealthy when you're with people who have less money than you. And it's the same with social standing. You want to look like, we're herd animals. You want to be part of the herd. That's another human instinct, and I think that's genetic, and it's very difficult to break that. It's much easier and comfortable and safer to be part of the herd. So you tend to dress and look like and behave like they do, and and sadly it's the mavericks, the people who do unusual things that people point at that achieve remarkable things because they don't behave like the herd. If you want to be part of the 10%, you can't behave the same way the 90% do. You have to behave in a very different way, and you'll get a different output. But there's a lot of pressure on, less so as you get older, less so if you're backed into a corner and you have no choice but to do something, as I was. But when you're younger, it's just easier to conform. I mean, why push boundaries? Why not just go to Benidorm with Magaluf for your mates, because that's what everybody does. And if there's no different paradigm, then you just think that's all there is, and that's the way the world is. But it's not the way the world is. It's the way your little circle is. It's the way your horizon isn't so far away. You should be pushing and looking a lot further than that. Um,
I think that's why sources like conversations like this and some of the different episodes we've done and some of the fantastic YouTubers you mentioned, Dave Ramsey, but there's so many more, even more mainstream than that. They're on a smaller level that are reaching people and are educating. That's information that you maybe don't learn in the schooling system for whatever reason, and maybe we can ponder why that is. But
yeah,
I
sure.
certainly think there's more resources now than ever before, and if you choose to become financially educated, then you can radically change the game. And one of the first really financial episodes I did was with Andrew Craig, the author of How to Own the World. And that was
Right.
back at episode 42. And the number of young people in my audience, kind of early 20s, mid 20s, that messaged me being like, "Oh, right, that's me going to understand how to set up a direct debit to an ISA,
Yeah.
invest in an index fund, pay yourself first," all these different phrases that are second nature maybe to people like ourselves at this stage now, Perry. But previous to having your eyes opened, you'd be none the wiser because it's not discussed in the schooling system.
Um, I'm I'm writing a book right now. I've wrote a couple of books on my website, the free ebooks, stupidasnorm.co.uk. There's a couple of free ebooks on there, but I'm writing one I want to print right now. It will be called The Little Book of Money. But and it's a bit of the basics about how to become wealthy, not just to manage money, how to become wealthy, and the bit that isn't taught in school. And I want to write another book about called what they didn't tell you in school, or what they should have told you in school. Um, and again, this is it's I don't blame the schools for that. A part of me thinks, what's the point? Because I get this all the time. Why isn't this taught in school, Perry? And I used to say, well, what's the point? If I was to, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. If I can tell you I can sit anybody down, and within half an hour I can design a plan for them to become wealthy in 10 years. If they just sacrifice what they're doing right now, a bit of hard work, give it 10 years, millionaire, done. But the people just walk away and say, no, I'm not doing that. And there's more to it. The more I think about this, do you watch a guy called Jordan Peterson, Professor
Yeah, I
Jordan
like
Peterson?
Jordan Peterson a lot. Yeah, I've seen him
Okay,
live
so
as well. It's been great.
have you? Right. Well, I wish I'd seen him live. So, and he goes into this a lot about, it's not just telling people, because you can tell people, you can say, here's the plan, here's the book, put your numbers in there, here's the flow chart, do this, da 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 da, da, and come out at the end. That's not what humans do. It takes more than just passing the knowledge on. If you get a room of 50 kids in a classroom or whatever, you know, 10% of them will have an IQ less than 83, which means they're probably not going to do it, because that's the statistics, 83. So, which means you can't be trained to do anything that's useful. So there's 10% of your audience gone. You'll have 10% of dreamers who'll be looking out the window. 10% people like me who've got ADHD and we're looking and just can't hold their attention for attention span more than 5 minutes. You've got people who are arrogant. You've got who think you don't know what you're talking about. You stupid old bugger. Um, so there's all these characters in there. Then you've got to think about if there's a lot of when they talk about character, and they chat about is it nature or nurture? Is it genetics or is it the way you're brought up? Well, psychologists can't agree, but what they all agree on is that it's at least 50% genetic, at least 50%. So that means it's more than 50% genetic, which means there's 50% of a person's character, and you've probably got 500 genetic markers on you that will manifest themselves sometimes throughout your lifetime, not all at once, throughout your lifetime, and there is nothing you can do about that.
You're like a
That you
puppet on a string at that point, aren't you?
absolutely, you can't change your character. You can change your behavior, but you can't change your character. You can wrestle with it and say, I recognize that's what I want to do, but I'm not going to do that because it's not good for me. I'm going to do this. So there be, I mean, if you're in a classroom and you're being the shit's being beaten out of you by your parents every night, that's not going to beat you down a bit. If your uncle Billy's been fiddling with you, that's not going to work. If you haven't had supportive parents, or if you've got great parents who are saying, "Come on, son, you could do," or you've got a bad peer group, who are out with knives so there's all these factors you're taking. So it doesn't matter if someone like me goes in and says, "Ta-da, here's how you do it." It's dead easy because 90% of people won't do it. The 10% who will do it are probably genetically disposed to do it anyway. And all I would do going in there was give them the fast route to do it because they would have done it anyway somewhere along the line. So is it worth it? I don't know. But
if
I'd like to go in there. What I'd like to do is try and run. I've got another person who is a governor at a school, and we're talking about going in and doing a little test. So getting to fill some sheets out. What's your chances of investing a pension? How much you think how much you need to retire, and then give them the presentation, then give them another test afterwards, and just see how the attitudes had changed and see whether that was worthwhile. Because I would just like to prove it one way or the other.
And then just hope off the back of that presentation that they start to soak in more content, because I think it's a gradual thing. Like one impactful day like that is huge. And I know that people that have gone to, like, so you were talking about property, a lot of people maybe go to like a property training event and that's the spark, but then they have to go away and actually do some learning, do some investing, save up their money to make the deposit or source deals or whatever it is they're choosing to do. But it's not just that one landmark event. It's all the things that take place afterwards that get them invested. So if you can get a classroom of kids bought into this process, a percentage of those, maybe as high as 10, maybe as low as 10, maybe higher than that, will get involved in that over the longer term, maybe consume YouTube channels like yours, consume self-development podcasts on finance, and they'll end up in a better position. But hopefully that initial spark or interest in them will grow. It's interesting you bring up the personality piece as well. Perry, because I've hosted Thomas Erickson, who's the author of Surrounded by Idiots, and he talks about making changes to personality. And I definitely think there are people who are predisposed to being excited by the data and the numbers and then the action off the back of that, whereas there's others that will always really struggle to do that. But if I look at you, Perry, and one of the first section of the show, we were talking about how for 57 years of your life, you were not predisposed to behaving in a fiscally responsible way, and something had to change for you to do that.
Yeah, I'm a lazy person. I'm being blessed with a high IQ, but that is another part of my character. It's very lazy. That's why I said I was waiting for the world to recognize my genius and give me the money, but that doesn't work. So yes, I spent many years doing the very least that I could possibly do in order to get through life. And it didn't work. It's not a good plan. Evidently, it's not a good plan. So you have to do something remarkable if you want to achieve something remarkable. That's the top and bottom of it. Everything comes at a price. But if you're not willing to pay the price, then you can't do it. And I've said this. There's 3 reasons people won't become wealthy. I've mentioned them already, but I just want to crystallize this. It's hard work. It's going to take hard work. It will take you working 40 hours a week is part-time. Believe me, if you're working 40 hours a week and you think that's normal, it is normal, but that's why you're average. It's part-time. You're going to have to work 60 to 80 hours a week. It's hard work. The second thing is it's sacrifice. If what you're doing right now isn't making you wealthy, then you need to pretty much change everything you're doing right now, because what you're doing It's what you're putting into the system is kicking out this, and so you need to change what you're putting into the system. So you have to stop it. Now, as human beings, we don't like that because we like things to be normal. We like things to not change. We don't like disruption.
The status
Uh,
quo.
the status quo, it's much more comfortable because, and again, that's a very deep genetic thing. That's because we don't like change because it represents a threat, and we would like to stay in comfort and with a herd and nothing to change and stay the same. So you have to change everything. That means sacrifice. So you've got to stop going out with your mates on weekends. You've got to stop buying clothes. You stop upgrading your car every 3 years. Stop going on a holiday. You're going to have to work harder, see less of your family. That's sacrifice. That's the second reason people don't do it. And the third one is, I said, you have to do these for 10 years. I said to a guy in a bar, I don't get recognized very often. I'm not famous, but one guy did see me in a bar, and he says, "Are you that bloke of the YouTube?" I says, "Yes, mate." He says, "Oh, can you make me rich?" I says, "Well, it depends." He said, "Well, it depends on what?" I says, "Oh, it depends how bad you want it." He says, "Oh, I want it pretty bad." Like, I says, "Well, okay, I'll tell you what to do." I says, work an extra 20 hours a week, stop seeing your family, stop seeing your friends, stop buying clothes, stop going on holiday, and do that for 10 years and invest 60% of what you earn, and you'll be wealthy. And you're like, well, I don't want that. And
The
they're not willing
price
to pay the
wasn't
price.
worth it for him. Yeah, the
No,
price wasn't worth it for him. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. It's
yeah,
it. I think it's a compelling message, and one of the financial independence retire early guys that I've had on the show is an American guy called Steve Adcock that retired at 35, and he was doing a very frugal lifestyle, but also earning huge sums. Him and his wife were both earning about $120,000 a year in big
right.
IT jobs, so they were packing away significant sums, which meant they were able to do it very quickly whilst they're living quite frugally. But as
Yeah,
you're saying, with minimum wage jobs, McDonald's jobs, it is possible, but the sacrifices may be perhaps
huge.
even greater because
It is, yeah.
the delta to close is bigger.
Yeah, it is. And one of the things I do is I do personal consulting for an hour at a time, telephone or Zoom or whatever. And you have no idea that some of the people ring me up, as you say, the rich people who are earning, I can't give too many details away. Of course, let's say a couple who earn 60 grand each, but are skint because they live a lifestyle. They live in London, not atypically, and that lifestyle down there is phenomenal. He was a
The
bit late,
fixed cost can be
he,
really high, so rental or mortgage are through the
but
roof.
yeah, but it's a lifestyle as well. He was a bit late for the meeting, and he said, "I'm sorry, I had to take the kids rowing." So I says, "Well, yeah, rowing's not very big in Gates. I don't have that sort of stress to take my kids rowing." He lived in Henley. But see, that's the lifestyle down there. You've got it, and that's what you got to do. And I said, you need to stop buying food at Marks and Spencers and go to Lidl and much everything. But that's a big lifestyle change if that's what you want to do, and you have this. If people look at you in a certain way and you don't want them to look at you in a different way, then you've got to fall in line with that lifestyle. And it's tough to break away because you've disappointed a lot of people.
Abnormal results require abnormal behaviors. What
Sure.
characteristics do you think are required to succeed in this kind of approach?
You don't have to care what other people think, and that's a really tough thing to do. By the way, if you're surrounded by people, my mother was complaining last week, and she said, "Oh, this and this." I says, "Yeah, man." I said, "I've just had to pay 10 grand to replace the roof," and she says, "Well, that's because you've got too many properties, isn't it?" Right, right. There's a bit of peer pressure for you there. I stopped expecting support from him a long time ago, by the way. But so that's it. So, but you'll get that, and your friends will say, "What are you doing that for?" And as you drift away from them, they'll be pointing at you or talking about you behind your back, and they stop ringing you up because you stop going out with them because you don't have the time with them. You can't, you're not willing to put the money into that and waste the money instead of investing it. So it's an ability to be different, and I think that's probably the biggest thing, to be different and not care. And that's tough when you're young. It doesn't matter when you're an old bugger like me, 62 in July, because I don't go out drinking anymore. There's no pressure on me to go out Fridays and Saturday nights. There's no pressure on me to go and look for a partner because I've got my partners downstairs with my grandson. I don't have to do that. So that my life's very different, and I do appreciate that it's much tougher to be young.
That's a good
But
level of self-awareness, Perry, because I think the listeners listening to this will be thinking, right, okay, what does this mean for me in the grand scheme of things? Does it mean that I don't go out to find my potential wife or husband? That's a very interesting point. But I guess if you can find somebody that's aligned with those goals, then maybe it's
You can
maybe you
retire
have
in
to look in different places.
you can retire in 10 years. If you're a 20-year-old, you can retire in 10 years. All you do is you get a job, a standard job, and then you do bar work or drive for Uber 4 hours. So if you work 4 hours extra a day as a side hustle, you would still get you'd be working 50% more than most people. You'd be getting 8 hours sleep a night and probably getting every weekend off as well. So what's hard about that? And then if you found somebody, so and if you take that 20 that extra 20 hours, so it's 50% of your current earnings, and invest that over 10 years, you would have enough to kick out enough to cover all your bills from your first wage. And you put it in a Vanguard ISA or something like that. You could retire. And now it would be a very frugal lifestyle. It would be enough to cover your first salary, but you could, if you lived like the man you mentioned, live frugally. And if you had a sexual partner who had the same attitude as you, then you would retire in 10 years on twice the income coming in, because you'd both be doing it. So it is possible, but it's hard. I can't sugarcoat it anyway. But you don't have to be as smart as me. Do it in 15 years. Sure. Would you like to be a millionaire in 15 years? I'll tell you how to do it. And
That's
if
true.
you follow
You
the
can
plan,
extend the timescales. You
yeah,
can
yeah,
extend the timescales, and I guess one of the big things is you're talking about doing it on minimum wage. I mentioned Steve Adcock did it on a pretty big salary. There's maybe people that can do it on a mid-range corporate job if they can find the side hustle to up the hours on the side of that and to apply themselves. And like, I suppose if you were maybe doing this when you were in your politics job, or when you had one of your I think it was a mortgage broker you said you worked
yep,
as well, it would have maybe been quicker to get to the goal, or you could have done it in 10 years with slightly less sacrifice, albeit still
yeah,
ensuring you kind of hit
absolutely.
that kind of 60% mark.
There's a wealth, what I call a wealth formula. I made it up. It's not really a formula, by the way, but it's a combination. So wealth is the combination of money to invest, an advantageous interest rate, and time. Now, those three are variables. Depends how much money you put in. It depends on the interest rate. It depends on the time. But if you play with them, so if you want to extend the time, then you don't need so much money in. Or if the interest rate gets higher, you don't need so much money, or you can put the same amount of money, but you'll get less. You need less time. So if you play with the variables, you can extend that. Like an accordion, to bring it longer if you want to do that, or you can compress it down as I am doing, because I had to, because I had no choice, because I was stupid all my life. Then you can do it my way as well. But it is possible to do it in 10 years, as I'm demonstrating.
Yeah, I think you're demonstrating it really clearly, Perry. The different topics you cover in your YouTube channel are fantastic, and I think we've had such a wide and varied discussion today. If people want to continue the conversation with you and learn more about your movement and your journey, 5 years in, 5 years to go, where should they head towards?
Just head to YouTube. Stupid is the norm. Please subscribe. I do appreciate your company and any support in the way. It is hard, believe me.
Brilliant, Perry. That'll be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you to you, the listener. And I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.